You know that feeling when life seems peaceful, almost perfect, until the ground starts shaking beneath your feet? I lived that at 51 years old when I discovered that my younger neighbor, the one I thought was a friend, was my own husband's mistress. Oh, my dear, the pain of lies and betrayal knows no age, and it doesn't wait for the right moment to strike. But I also learned that even in the middle of the desert, we can find an oasis of strength and self-love to rise again. Here, in this little corner, I share real stories, made for you, who understands that life isn't just flowers, but also lessons and new beginnings. If you love heartfelt stories that make you reflect on family, relationships, and the courage to move forward, come along with me. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you don't miss a thing, and join the conversation by sharing your own stories in the comments, because together, we're stronger, and our voices deserve to be heard.
30 years of marriage, so meticulously pressed that even the living room clock seemed to tick in rhythm with Richard's smile. Every morning, I straightened his tie, dusted the photo frames, always just the two of us, no children, neatly fitted into that picture-perfect marriage the neighbors whispered about at the market. Me, Beatrice, a storyteller long before I became an accountant's wife, pretended not to notice the echo that lingered in the hallway after the door closed. Just me, the whistling kettle, and a stubborn loneliness draped in lace. Still, we kept up our rituals like varnish on old furniture. Thursdays, dinner at the corner bistro. Fridays, he dozed off in his armchair with the TV on, while I collected prolonged silences, realizing that our flawless relationship smelled of polish, not flowers. It was hard to admit that perfection, too, could be a sweet lie, the prelude to a far greater lie and betrayal. Me, already in my 50s, praying I wouldn't become just another wife betrayed by the neighbor, like in the soap operas. But fear whispered, soft as curtains in the breeze. You know, my dear, I understand now how certain details murmur uncomfortable truths. An album without children, a mechanical I love you, his forgotten coffee cup always at 5 p.m. These are threads that, when pulled, unravel an entire life. Family is more than a pretty picture, and when the marriage ended, though I didn't know it yet, it was precisely because I ignored those signs. Tell me, what detail would make you question that happiness and perhaps avoid betrayal before it even happens?
She arrived like someone who wanted nothing, carrying a pot of lavender and a smile that bordered on exaggerated warmth. She said her name was Giovanna, but preferred to be called Jenna, a name that sounded modern, effortless, almost rehearsed. 29 years old, a physiotherapist, she claimed she'd come to Providence to care for an elderly woman. But what struck me most was that restless look in her eyes, the kind warned by someone who'd been deeply rejected and was now desperate to prove she deserved love. I can't explain it, but I sensed she was one of those souls searching for a lap where only a shoulder existed. It started with borrowing sugar, then offering to water my plants when we traveled, always so eager to please with that practiced charm. One day, between conversations, she confessed her last boyfriend had called her too much. Too much for him, too much for his dreams, too much for any future. She laughed as she said it, but there were shards in that laughter. It was as if she carried an emotional hunger that sometimes leaked through her gestures. Self-love isn't something you find on a pharmacy shelf, and she hadn't learned that yet. Foolishly, I thought I was doing good by offering her company. I'd been a young once, felt invisible too, and imagined I could be the kind neighbor, almost an aunt. But now I wonder, is it worth opening your door to someone hiding a storm behind a breeze? Would you help a lonely neighbor? Because sometimes, my dear, what looks like need is just the first thread of a carefully woven lie and betrayal.
It all started with a light bulb, one of those that burns out just when the night seems darkest. Jenna showed up at our door, timid, asking if Richard could help. He smiled, that smile I knew so well, and went. 15 minutes later, he returned, saying the socket was rusted. The next week, it was her shower, then the squeaky gate, and I slowly realized he'd become her man of the house. Me, who'd always found kindness beautiful, began noticing these favors were growing too intimate for comfort. I remember one Saturday morning, I was sweeping the sidewalk when I saw Jenna with flour-dusted hands, Richard behind her, laughing, saying, "The secret to bread is in the touch." My chest tightened. Was this just friendship? Or was it something else dressed up as neighborly warmth? I tried to shrug it off, but you can't silence the intuition of a woman who's lived long enough to know better. You feel betrayal in your gut before it ever reaches your heart. Deep down, I wanted to believe it was all coincidence. But a decades-long marriage doesn't survive on chance. It survives on trust. And mine was wilting, like a flower left too long in the sun. When her "thank you" turned into hugs, and hugs turned into whispered laughter, I finally understood this was no longer innocent. Where would you draw the line? Because sometimes what looks like help is just betrayal wearing the mask of goodwill. It happened at our street neighbor's daughter's birthday party, one of those community gatherings where you bring a pie and leave with whispers and cheap wine. Jenna arrived late, the way people do when they crave attention, wearing a red dress too tight for the occasion. But it wasn't just the dress. It was how she laughed too loudly, leaned in too close when talking to men, and most of all, how Richard's eyes trailed after her, even when he thought no one noticed. But I noticed. And in that moment, something inside me shattered, silently. I tried distracting myself with old Mrs. Vera's chatter about medicinal herbs, but my days kept drifting back to him. I watched when Jenna spilled wine and Richard rushed with a napkin. I saw her whisper something in his ear and him laughing, that guilty laugh I knew too well. There, among trays of finger food and plastic cups, my heart delivered its verdict. No marriage, however happy, can disguise eyes that linger on another body. It stung to admit, but I was the aging heroine of a telenovela, finally seeing the plot twist. On the walk home, he called the party lively, and all I could think, lively for whom? Because I returned with vinegar on my tongue and a knot in my chest. Sometimes, my dear, lies and betrayal bloom brightest in celebration, like weeds in the most tended garden. Tag someone who's seen this movie because God knows I prayed it was just fiction.
My Richard had always been methodical. He even scheduled time to water the plants. But after that party in Cape Cod, I began noticing a new precision to his routine. Every day at 5 p.m., he'd appear in the backyard garden right when Jenna usually returned from the clinic. He'd hose the lawn slowly, wearing a white tee like some accidental advertisement for innocence. I watched from the kitchen window, stirring my tea with false calm. The sun lit his face, but what burned was the acid rising in my throat. One day, I marched outside under the guise of pruning hibiscus. He startled like a man caught mid-sin. "Heat wave coming," he blurted, wiping non-existent sweat, while I pretended not to notice his stiff shoulders. Then, movement. Jenna waved from her bedroom window, all neighborly smiles. Since when did she watch my husband from her bedroom? The question lodged in my ribs like a splinter. That evening, when he announced he'd forgotten something at the store, at 5 p.m. sharp, my hands clenched around the pruning shears. Betrayal starts this small, in flimsy excuses, in clocks that tick toward ruin. Share the flimsiest lie you've caught someone in because, honestly, I couldn't tell if he was watering begonias or mustering the courage to drown our marriage.
It was one of those overcast days when even the sky looked weary. I was driving to visit my friend Sandra at her new countryside home when I passed a place that froze my blood, a motel on Route 6, its neon sign flickering erratically, a rusty, no registration, privacy guaranteed plaque swaying in the wind. I chuckled darkly at the cliché until I spotted something familiar in the parking lot. His car, tucked in a shadowy corner, coated in dust and deceit. The ground vanished beneath me. I sat there, staring, bargaining with logic. Maybe a coincidence, maybe a client, maybe... But deep down, we always know. The motel's peeling facade screened what I refused to hear. My marriage now hid in cheap, soulless places, the kind no decades-long relationship should ever visit. He was trading our history for furtive hours where love doesn't live, only haste and lies do. I drove home like returning from a funeral. No tears, just me on the couch listening to the house's creaks, begging them to disprove what I knew. But silence was the only reply. That's when I understood. My marriage had ended, even if he still kissed my forehead at dawn. What ordinary place hides your secrets? Because sometimes, my dear, life isn't shattered by a scream, but by a motel curtain left slightly ajar.
It was dusk when everything finally collapsed. I was ironing clothes in the laundry room when muffled laughter drifted from the backyard. Peering through the curtains, I saw it, like watching a film I'd never bought tickets for. Jenna lounged on the deck chair with a wine glass, while Richard stood over her with that conquering grin. Then he laughed. She's naive, hasn't got a clue. The words pierced me like a thorn. I froze. Sweat trickled down my temple, but the rest of me turned to ice. I tried processing what I'd heard. Me, the woman who'd shared decades of marriage, was now naive in their private jokes? I didn't need more words. They weren't just having an affair. They were mocking my trust, my life, the marriage I believed unshakable. 30 seconds of paralysis. 30 seconds that changed everything, still haunting my sleepless nights. I didn't storm outside, didn't scream. Just returned to the kitchen, gripping the sink, trying to recall who I was before being his wife. Like I'd slowly vanished, erased by routine, and the lies I'd refused to see. What would you do in those 30 seconds? Because sometimes devastation arrives whispered and obliterates worlds. The pain swallowed me whole. No amount of strength could have braced me. I locked the bathroom door and crumpled onto the cold tiles. 47 minutes, I counted. Tears streaked my ruined makeup, lipstick smeared like my dignity. My phone slipped to the floor, Sandra's text glowing, "You deserve better." But I couldn't reply, just sobbed, replaying every moment I trusted him and the life I'd built around those lies. Each gasp brought flashes, nursing him through fever, pawning my youth's jewelry to cover his debts, forced smiles to keep the family intact, all for a man who called me naive. I didn't know if I mourned the marriage's end or the woman I'd buried to sustain it. When you disappear into a relationship, betrayal appears in the mirror long before the bed. I rose unsteadily, facing a stranger in the mirror. There, between cold tiles and dried tears, I vowed not to die emotionally in that bathroom. I didn't know how I'd recover, only that I must. Describe your darkest hour in 3 words. Mine? Floor? Cold? Over. I found the letter in a pink envelope, slipped under my door like some thank you note. Written in dark blue ink, the paper still reeked of Jenna's cheap, cloying perfume. It began with, "Sorry if I hurt anyone," and ended with, "Love doesn't choose the right moment, it just happens." I read each line with a lump in my throat, searching for remorse, but found only excuses. She claimed it wasn't planned, that Richard felt alone, that I was distant. Lie upon lie, as if a mistress could rewrite my history with pretty words. Passages about soul connections and unexpected love felt like being slapped with lace gloves. The paper was damp, with tears or humidity I'll never know, but every stain looked like another act in the drama where I played the fool. I tore it up, but first I memorized the cruelest line. "You're a strong woman. You'll move on." Oh, my dear, the brutality of being betrayed and told you're resilient, as if my pain were invisible, as if rebuilding a life were as simple as turning a page. What lie would you cross out from that letter? Because love born from betrayal isn't love, it's cowardice.
The office was cold as Richard's stare across the table. We were there to sign papers, divide assets, formalize what no one imagines when saying "I do." The marriage was over, and he seemed more concerned about the car and joint account than the respect we'd once shared. His lawyer, a blank-faced young man, droned legal terms while Richard declared, "You don't deserve half." I sat there, numb, as he listed everything I failed to do for us. Forgotten were the years I paused my career for his, the meals cooked without appetite, the sleepless nights enduring his snoring. "You never understood my dreams," he said, as if love doesn't mean carrying another's dreams too. But the worst, "Jenna listens to me. You never did." A knife twist. Because listening was all I'd ever done, even when it gutted me. I signed, hand steady, gaze unbroken, because while he tried to diminish me, I knew a cheater doesn't just lose half their assets, they forfeit half their soul. Which of these would wound you deepest? My dear, lies and betrayal sting, but contempt dressed in legal coldness? That's a cruelty only the betrayed understand. I returned to what was once our castle, now echoing only my footsteps. Every room held fragments of a story I longed to erase but couldn't. The walls, once lined with smiling photos, stood bare, their faint outlines marking where frames once hung, silent witnesses to a decades-long marriage now shattered. I walked slowly, my steps reverberating through time itself, as if the house were waiting for an answer that would never come. Sitting in the living room chair, I rested my head against the window and realized this emptiness hid an opportunity, a chance to rebuild, to rediscover who I was beyond the chains of lies and betrayal. The quiet taught me that the end of a happy marriage could birth something greater, an invitation to cultivate self-love and redefine family, starting with myself alone. Holding an old portrait, I smiled through tears. What would I carry if I could start anew? The pain or just the lessons? Family isn't those frozen in photos, but those etched in your soul. What would you take into your fresh beginning? Because sometimes, my dear, a house may empty, but a heart never does. Past midnight, his off-key voice drifted from the yard, Richard with a battered guitar, mangling a schmaltzy ballad only the love-struck or desperate would attempt. Neighbors peered through windows, snickering, while I hid behind curtains, chest tight with secondhand shame. He truly believed these clumsy serenades could undo months of lies, as if strummed apologies erased betrayal. But some wounds, my dear, won't heal with songs. They demand time, respect, and above all, truth. That pitiful scene proved even he couldn't accept how thoroughly our marriage had ended. Watching the man I'd loved become a stranger, crooning to ghosts, I wondered, what's the worst reconciliation attempt you've witnessed? Because sometimes endings morph into farce, and we're left front row learning strength from the spectacle. I met Sandra on a rainy afternoon when pain felt like a burden carried alone. At 48, her eyes bore the marks of a betrayal that lasted 10 years. In our Danbury support group, she said something that stayed with me.
Divorce hurts less than the lies. A raw truth, sharp as broken glass. Among women who'd faced their own hells, I realized suffering is a mirror. We rise when we recognize our own strength reflected back. Sandra spoke with razor blade honesty that somehow also felt like a bear hug. She taught me that seeking therapy isn't weakness, but bravery. The courage to stare at your wounds and declare, I deserve better. That even when a marriage ends, you can rebuild with self-love as your foundation. Her story became our lighthouse, proving the family we create can be one of warrior women bound by shared scars and survival. In that circle of folding chairs, I learned rebirth comes from within, that rising stronger is a slow, stumbling journey, but worth every shaky step. Lies and betrayal leave scars, yes, but they also carve wisdom deeper into your bones. What phrase would make you rise from your chair? Because sometimes, my dear, the right words are the lifeline we need.
Fernando entered my life on a chilly afternoon between dusty bookshelves in Boston. He was reading poetry when our eyes met, the world suddenly quiet, as if narrowing to just us. Then it happened. Our fingers brushed, reaching for the same book, and I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. The silence between us was cozy, like a warm blanket on a winter night. He wasn't just a new man. He was an invitation to trust again, to believe love could bloom from ashes. We took our time, lingering at a nearby cafe, laughing over trivial things. For the first time in forever, I let myself dream. Because rebuilding isn't about forgetting, it's finding present moments worth smiling for. Fernando taught me trust grows in details, in unspoken gestures, in the respect of truly being heard. Even now, I wonder, what makes you trust someone new? A gentle touch, honest eyes, or simply when they show up unmasked, unhurried? Self-love taught me to value what matters, and with Fernando, I learned hearts can reopen even after betrayal's wildfire. What would make yours unbolt the door? The news struck like thunder on a gray morning. Richard had a heart attack, and the hospital's silence felt heavier than the machines surrounding him. At the funeral, amid suspicious whispers, I heard someone murmur, "Did she really have the nerve to come?" The question cut deep, because there I stood, no longer a wife, but a woman who'd chosen to move forward, even with her scars still raw. The air was thick with judgmental stares and hushed gossip, but I knew my place wasn't in the audience of others' pain. It was within my own life, rebuilding what the ended marriage had taken. Between wilted flowers and hollow condolences, I wondered, how do you bury the past? Can we truly inter grief to make room for hope? Or do we carry each hurt like baggage, only lightened when we choose forgiveness, especially of ourselves? I smiled inwardly, tears unshed, because beneath the sorrow, this goodbye was also a beginning, an invitation to rediscover myself, tend to my self-love, and perhaps crack open the door to new stories. How would you bury your past? My dear, life is made of farewells and resurrections.
I remember signing up for that tango class on a whim. My legs shook, my feet stumbled. I looked like a fledgling learning to fly. But there was something liberating in that rhythm. The music wrapping around us, steps clicking into place, laughter bubbling through missteps. This wasn't just dance. It was a silent shout of freedom after years lugging the weight of a dead marriage. With every wrong step, sweat dripped not just from my body, but from my soul. The tango became my compass, reawakening a body exhausted from pretense. His hands, the instructors, of course, held mine carefully. Proving trust means leaning in without fear. In that moment, I realized dancing alone is its own bravery, and freedom begins where fear ends. Now, when I hear that melody, my feet itch to move, because I've learned rebirth happens in clumsy but hopeful steps. And you, my friend, What song would make you dance alone? It was a quiet afternoon with the wind playing through the leaves when Fernando surprised me with a simple yet profound gesture. He knelt on the porch of our Martha's Vineyard cottage, holding my hand with that tenderness only true men possess. No grand promises the world expects, just these words: I don't promise perfection, only truth. That, my dear, is worth more than any vow recited in a crowded church. Having witnessed lies and betrayal firsthand, I knew a happy marriage isn't born from a ring's sparkle, but from sincerity in one's eyes and words. That moment proved love can rebirth when there's humility to be real, to stumble and try again. An invitation to trust, to open my heart fearlessly and finally believe life can be generous. As I admired the simple band, my chest swelled with hope, because ultimately, it's not the jewel's size that matters, but the weight of the promise it carries. What honest promise outweighs 1,000 vows? Reflect, my friend. True love isn't measured in gold, but in raw honesty.
I sat by the ocean's edge, the wind dancing through my silver-streaked hair, gazing at the new wedding band gleaming on my finger. This is more than a ring. It's a testament to everything I've lived through. The wounds left by lies and betrayal, yes, but also the strength that pulled me back up. Each scar I carry has become a lesson. Every tear transformed into the courage to declare, I deserve better. The past no longer defines me. It taught me wisdom, how to nurture self-love, and the power of new beginnings. I remember the dark days when the world seemed to crumble around me, and those moments when I smiled through the pain and whispered, I will rise again, even if it takes time. Today, the family I've built is woven from conscious choices, genuine friendships, and the self-respect I've earned. As I watch the endless sea, that great healer and renewer of all things, I feel ready for whatever comes next. Because life, like the tides, moves in cycles of endings and rebirths, always carrying hope on its waves. My dear friend, I leave you with this question echoing in the quiet of my heart. What wound became your strength? Share your scar. For in the end, we are all warriors, learning to dance with our pains while celebrating our triumphs. After following this journey, I want you to reflect. What does self-love mean to you? How can you transform pain into strength to rise again? Remember, no matter how hard it gets, there's always a path to rebuild your life and create a brighter future, free from lies and betrayal. Share in the comments. What's the most important lesson you're taking from this story? Have you faced something similar? Your experience could help others in the same situation. Let's build a network of support and courage. Together, we're unstoppable. If you're not yet part of our community, join this sisterhood of wise, resilient women. Hit subscribe and bell to get all our stories and reflections. Come claim your space where every voice matters, especially yours.